Hello Chipmunk and Chipette fans, my name is Grandy Tamias, and welcome back to another installment of Alvin and the Chipmunks Elaborations. And, well, you read the title. Now that it's been confirmed that the CGI series has ended, today's topic will be what's going to happen with the Alvin and the Chipmunks franchise next. So first, I want to get a few things out of the way, since in one of my previous videos I got a lot of comments from people who are still skeptical about what Ross Bagdasarian Jr. meant with this quote, to another TV series that we just finished last year. He never refers to the CGI series by name or anything to specify that this is the one that started in 2015, but considering that it's the only Alvin and the Chipmunks TV series to have existed in the entire 21st century so far, and likely your lifetime too, considering when most of you watching this video were born, there's no other Alvin and the Chipmunks TV series that he could have been referring to, as the last one prior to it ended in December of 1990, if we're not counting the TV specials or Universal films. Also, about that last year thing, last year being 2022, since this article was released in December of 2023, and now we're near the end of January 2024, I want to share this comment from Gleeful Chibi, and certain aspects about this will be important later on. Anyway, Chibi brought it to my attention that the series did technically already end in 2022, if you watched the show in France or Canada, which were the first regions to air the final episode, the tour, in December of that year. December 1st to be exact for France according to Monkipedia. The episode's premiere in the United States happened a few months later in March of 2023 and ran simultaneously with Nickelodeon's Kids' Choice Awards, but you can check out this video for more on that. I also want to mention that in the 2019 Monk Media interview, of which Chibi was in, Ross Bagdasarian Jr. said,
"The process of doing these shows, it takes so long. It's about 9 months from a beginning idea that Janice or Michael or Vanessa might have to actually watching it on television."
Which, if this remained true during or after the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic, then that means production on the tour likely started in early 2022, and had to have ended sometime before December 1st. If I were to take an educated guess, probably sometime between September and November, depending on the gap of time between the end of production and broadcast in France and Canada. This would put the start of production for that episode between January and March of 2022, again, if we're going by the 9-month production. But then, let's get to the next part, Ross's quote. What does he mean by finished? Chris Woodley from Monkiverse, formerly Monk Media, commented saying that Ross could have just meant that they were just done with the 5th season. After all, in previous videos I have shown this article from Nick Alive of it being confirmed that seasons 6 and 7 were planned according to Nickelodeon. And this was in November of 2019, when the 4th season was still airing, and was less than a month after the interview I previously mentioned, October 13th to be exact. And obviously Chris was also in that. During that interview, Ross Bagdasarian Jr. and Janice Carmen said that the networks were interested in renewing the show for season 6 and 7.
Yeah, it's funny because all of the broadcasters are asking us, even though season 5 wouldn't even be finished until 2 years from now. We're working on them now, but won't be all finished until 2 years from now. All of the broadcasters are asking us to do additional seasons 6 and 7. So that would keep us working until 2025 on these shows.
Given the close proximity and time between the interview on October 13th and the publication of this article on November 6th, something has to be up, right? This is, again, an educated guess, but I think one of two things happened. One, Bagdasarian Productions had decided to go ahead with season 6 and 7 after this interview, but something happened later that made them go back on that decision. Or two, someone from Nickelodeon saw that interview and misinterpreted it as confirmation that the series would continue. The latter is probably a stretch, but not unheard of in the industry. In fact, Nick Alive themselves seem to be just as in the dark as we are on what happened to season 6 and 7. I don't really know what's going on here. Presumably Nickelodeon themselves were one of the broadcasters that wanted a season 6 and 7. Why would one of their own news outlets not know that those were cancelled even after the fact? Now, I'm no expert when it comes to investors and investing in media conglomerates, but I've always been under the impression that There were business people who put their money in Nickelodeon or Paramount or Viacom or whoever, expecting that all the films and TV shows were going to be released so that they could turn a profit, and thus the investors make money. If projects get cancelled, then that means that the money that the investors had initially put in to fund the creation, or in this case, purchasing the rights to air this piece of media, just goes to waste, or worse, pocketed by the corporation. And so, understandably, investors would be mad, especially if they weren't warned beforehand about the cancellation. We saw this happen recently with the Warner Brothers and Coyote versus Acme situation. Oh, hey look, it's the voice of Ruby Gillman. Filmmakers even canceled meetings that their representatives, and probably investors too, were going to have with Warner Brothers because canceling a project makes the company look unreliable. Okay, getting back on track, in this scenario, say for example that I'm an investor and I want to give some of my money to Nickelodeon so that they can purchase the rights to air 2 more seasons of Alvin and the Chipmunks. Ideally, those seasons come out and generate profit for Nick. But because I helped pay for it in the first place, I get some of that money back, hopefully more than what I put in, depending on how successful Alvin and the Chipmunks is with audiences. But suddenly, all signs point to the show being cancelled, and, well, just take a guess. Personal enjoyment of Alvin and the Chipmunks notwithstanding, how would you feel if your money just poofed? And even if I was reimbursed on my initial investment, I'm still going to be mad that I lost the opportunity to make a profit. Hopefully I didn't lose some of y'all during that business jargon. Again, I'm no expert, but I think that this is the kind of question that we should be asking, because understanding how these businesses work can give us an idea of what we're going to get from the future of the Chipmunks and how we get it. I don't have an answer, but maybe the fans aren't the only ones who should be mad that we aren't getting the next 2 seasons. But getting back to Chris's comment, is it possible that Bagdasarian could have only just finished with the 5th season, and that they're taking some time off before they start season 6? Well, this is also highly unlikely. For one thing, the wording, "to another TV series that we finished last year," makes it pretty clear that he meant the entire cartoon. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's never said anything like this before in other interviews, and it'd be kind of redundant to say that if we are going to get 2 more seasons. Besides, the season thing is kind of arbitrary to begin with. For one thing, none of the seasons are really defined by any kinds of trends or story arcs. Sure, seasons 4 and 5 had a little more continuity between episodes, but those moments were sprinkles compared to what some of us in the fandom, including me, have been clamoring for. But that's for another time. Aside from maybe the animation quality improving over time, there's no discernible reason why most episodes, at least plot-wise, can't be the beginning or end of a season, or be swapped between seasons. Like, would it really matter if the last episode of Season 1 and the first episode of Season 2 had been switched? They have nothing to do with any stories that came before or after them, and the animation quality is essentially the same that you wouldn't even notice if they were swapped. And not only that, they aired the same week in the US. Same thing happened with Seasons 3 and 4, and 4 and 5. So it's not like anyone, at least in the US, cared about having a gap between the end of one season and the start of another. And I think that's because Bagdasarian probably didn't take any breaks between seasons. They've mentioned before how rigorous the production schedule can be.
Well, we're going to be doing 5 seasons of shows. We're delivering, probably the second half of the 4th season right now. But 5 seasons of shows is, 260 original songs. So imagine the workload for that, as well as obviously the shows themselves. And so for us,
we have no life.
Yeah.
We have no life but this. We just want.
So I doubt that they ever specifically scheduled their production timeline to be, okay, we're going to make Season 1 from this time to this time, then we take a little break before we work on Season 2 from this time to this time. That likely was the case in the 80s, which typically ran its seasons from September to December every year, but now times have changed. Cartoons were just made differently back in the 80s. In the case of the 2015 series, because of how sporadic episode releases have been throughout the years and throughout different regions, I think Bagdasarian was just making the show continuously year-round and providing episodes to the broadcasters when they were ready. But then, of course, the broadcasters may be unpredictable. They may leave episodes on the shelf for months, sometimes years. And then there's the process of dubbing the show into other languages, probably explaining the gap for the tour that I was talking about earlier, since they'd have needed to get the French dub ready. Again, I don't know all this for sure, but I am aware that making cartoons is very complicated. And although I think that this is wishful thinking that goes against more than one quote from Ross in this article, let's just say for the sake of argument that we are getting season 6 and 7, Bagdasarian is taking an out-of-the-ordinary break, and that the next big thing for Alvin and the Chipmunks is not some yet-to-be-made reboot. I've heard some options like Bagdasarian possibly reviving the series in the future or rebranding it, maybe with a different name. Heck, they already did it with the 80s series when the show rebranded itself as The Chipmunks for its 6th and 7th seasons, and then again as The Chipmunks Go to the Movies for season 8. And cartoons still do this in the modern day. I doubt Bagdasarian are trying to repeat history here, especially since there was no bigger gap than usual between each rebranding of the 80s TV show, but I'm just throwing it out there. Another possibility I've heard is a new series that acts as a sequel to the 2015 series, so it's still in the same continuity. This one I think is even less likely since, outside of the small subgrouping of fans, I don't think that there's a demand for a continuation of the tour, especially not from Nickelodeon given how they treated the release of that episode. And like I said, continuity largely hasn't mattered to the show anyway, so in practice it might as well be a reboot. So I think the options of reviving or rebranding the series are grasping at straws, and I must reiterate that I'm not one of those people who were rooting for the show to end. In fact, I think it's kind of sad that it went out the way it did, with so little care by Nickelodeon. But I am anticipating the next reboot, because for reasons that I'll talk about in an upcoming elaboration, there is a chance, no matter how minuscule, that it could improve on any or all of the deeply ingrained problems that were holding the 2015 series down. I know we're all sick of reboots these days, but Alvin and the Chipmunks is arguably one of those franchises that needs it the most. Because one of the larger goals that you could say that the 2015 series failed at was getting the world to move on from the live-action Chipmunks. Wait, I can explain. I don't mean that in a bad way. I grew up watching these films, and I'm sure people like me will always fondly remember them. But they've been the definitive image of Alvin and the Chipmunks in the public eye throughout the entire lifespan of the 2015 series. And that means all the negativity that the franchise gets usually gets taken out on this version. The 2015 series had some undeserved hate too, but it was never to the same extent as with the movies. As a result, Alvin and the Chipmunks has been missing a lot of that goodwill with audiences for most of the 21st century so far, especially with the exponential rise of the internet and how it's allowed opinions on entertainment to become more vocalized. But getting back to the wide-reaching effect of the movies, there are kids who were born after the end of the movie era who are more familiar with this version than the animated series on TV. In fact, I have two cousins, two girls who are 9 and 7, and on my recent trip to Mexico, they told me how much they loved the live-action Chipmunks. We even rewatched all 4 films when we found out they were on Netflix over there. But when I asked them if they knew about the Nickelodeon Chipmunks, they didn't know and thought that they looked weird. The 2015 series, despite its longevity, didn't really capture the world's attention to become the new interpretation of Alvin and the Chipmunks for the latter half of the 2010s and early 2020s. Hopefully the next reboot will turn the image of this franchise around and cement itself in pop culture for however long it'll last. Even if it does mean that we'll never find out what happens to these chipmunks after the tour. Or will we? Plot twist, folks. We actually have a leaked storyboard of a scene that doesn't exist in the show. Not only does it have voiceover, but it's definitely from an episode that wasn't fully made, and not just a deleted scene. In fact, one bit of dialogue between Alvin and Officer Dangus implies that this takes place after the tour.
Oh, look at the rock star back with the class. How good of you to join us.
Now this is the level of continuity I'm talking about. I'll link the full thing in the description if you want to check it out because it's really amusing and I kind of wish it did get animated. Now, I know what you're thinking. If this storyboard is legitimate, which we know it is, and takes place in the post-Season 5 world of the CGI series, doesn't this contradict what I said before? Does this mean that we're getting a sequel series or actually Season 6 and 7? Well, we don't know. And this seems to make things all the more complicated when you consider Ross's words again. First, this storyboard was uploaded a while ago, but we don't know when it was created. It couldn't have been any earlier than 2022 if we are to believe that production of the tour started early on that year. But even then, we'd have to assume that Bagdasarian had the aftermath of the tour planned out around the same time that they were also working on that episode. Maybe those scripts were written in quick succession for all we know. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here and try to think up an explanation for why the show has ended, but we still got the storyboard. I think that back in early 2022, or whenever Michael Bagdasarian finished the script for the tour, he and or one of the other writers soon after started writing the episode that the storyboard is from, whatever it's called. And the writers were under the impression that they were still going to be making season 6 and 7. This unnamed episode got far enough along that storyboards and voiceover were done for it, but then, either due to loss of interest from the networks, or the Bagdasarian family deciding to just call it quits, season 6 and 7 get cancelled, and the rest is history, as far as we know. Now, this does make some assumptions, and it doesn't answer things like why Nick Alive is so confused, but this is the best that I could do based on the available information. So yeah, I know it's a rather sad note to end this kind of long video on, but like I said, I don't like the circumstances of how Season 5 was left to die on Nicktoons either. I really think that this show deserved better in a lot of respects, and if it was Bagdasarian's call to end it, I completely understand them. Maybe it's for the best. Like I said, this franchise has nowhere to go but up, and whatever happens next, I will be checking it out. Anyway, feel free to let me know in the comments. Are you convinced that the 2015 Alvin and the Chipmunks series is definitively over? Do you think that this incarnation of the Chipmunks will ever return? And what are your hopes for the next reboot? As always, you can suggest topics for future elaborations as well. Twitter and Discord, linked below. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed, have a nice day, and thank you for your time.